Welcome to Business Live. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, economist Professor Lord Mensah Lord's government's decision to opt for debt reprofiling rather than debt cancellation with external creditors.
Beyond aid means that Ghana should be ready for business. A country that is ready for business doesn't go for debt cancellation. It means that you're not managing the economy. But I believe, for debt reprofiling, it's something that our investors will buy on the table.
Government outlines some tough measures to check spending this year as calls grows for expenditure cuts because of debt domestic exchange program.
Yes, are going to be based on commitment basis. So don't go ahead of yourself and transact certain expenditures that will not even get through the government system, because if your budget is not there, you can then post requests for that.
Also in this bulletin, some staff of Vodafone Ghana uncertain about their future with the company following approval by the National Communications Authority to sell the Vodafone to Telecel. These and many others coming your way in a moment. Please stay. Pleasure you could stay on. I am Pious Kojo Backah. To our very first story, economist Professor Lord Mensah has indicated that government opting for debt reprofiling gives Ghana some leverage to borrow on the international market. This follows the recent assurance by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta saying government is targeting reprofiling of Ghana's debts from Group 20 developing countries rather than an outright cancellation. According to him, this is the way to achieving government's agenda, Ghana Beyond Aid.
I think the global trend now, reprofiling has been the order of the day. And if you listen to our, president some time ago, he said Ghana Beyond Aid. And Ghana Beyond Aid means that Ghana should be ready for business. And a country that is ready for business doesn't go for debt cancellation. It means that you're not managing the economy. But I believe, for debt reprofiling, it's something that our investors will buy on the table.
Let's move to the IMF program now, because the finance minister now says is targeting March 2023 instead of the February announced by the president earlier. Looking at how things are going in terms of our debt exchange program, where do you think, or when do you think we are likely to see this happen?
I think the time that has been set by the finance minister is quite overly optimistic. I mean, March is too early. Looking at the way we are at manner, we're going through even the domestic, debt restructuring or debt exchange program. Look at the investor identification, how we are struggling with it. And I believe that the March is overly optimistic. And we should look at somewhere middle of, this year, get into the latter part of the last quarter of the year.
I want to know how this may reduce the level of confidence in the sector, and if it will, what will be the impact?
As we speak now, it has, there's an impact, and you can see treasury bill demand swelling. That tells you that investor confidence has moved from long-term, government instrument to short-term. So you see people doing more of 91-day and then, rolling over. So if you look at the interest rate structures, you can see that, the bonds rates are coming down.
Are we giving too much, would you say, as a country in terms of getting the IMF program?
Yes. I mean, we're giving more. And of course, giving it more means that we anticipate a certain reward into the future. And the reward is going to be to have that fiscal space and then also get an IMF inflow and then possibly look at the way we can stay fiscally, disciplined when we get this IMF program, as far as the conditions that they attach to their support is concerned. But then we're giving so much because the exercise that is going on, of course, as your earlier questions, indicate, will affect investor confidence. That is why, I look at this exercise as an economic exercise, which we are looking out for a benefit that I've already indicated. But then the cost is to ensure that we maintain investor confidence throughout, the exercise, so that, after the exercise, we can bounce back as expected, because the interest rate and all those that are going to be slashed, if we don't tend to be, find our feet back, the economy, it will be a double loss to the investor.
And more on the economy, government says it has instituted some tough measures to strictly contain its expenditure this year. The assurance is coming at a time that there has been growing calls for expenditure cuts to support government's domestic debt exchange program. Ken Ofriatta is finance minister.
And how we then manage our ministries to make sure that there's no excessive expenditure.
Again, it comes back to some people trying to quantify these measures that you're already taking in the budget. And they see that it is still not enough, and maybe looking at the challenge that we are in, a lot can be done. The issues about ministers being moved around is the prerogative of the president, but when it comes to the expenditure of the ministries, agencies, so I would say the ball is in your court. There can be further squeeze as well to demonstrate our commitment and to share the burden, because then some are saying that the alternative to this debt exchange program, a partial one, is also government taking some cuts as well.
It's
more
true. I mean,
cuts.
George, if you look at, I think we have a 2 to 3% GDP reduction in expenditure, if you look at that. And then, as I mentioned, expenditures are going to be based on commitment basis. So don't go ahead of yourself and transact certain expenditures that will not even get through the gift system, because if your budget is not there, you can then post requests for that. So that we've now been able to integrate the HRMIS of GIFMIS, and that will help forestall ministers or officers, giving contracts that really the budget can support, so that we get into these arrears and liabilities. And that's important, and we are going to insist on those things. So really, on our part, as a ministry, and the oversight that we are now putting in place, the type of letters that are already gone out, I think we're going to see a very, very different year for our management of fiscal rectitude.
I get the austerity that is being championed, but some will look at your budget deficits as well and ask that they don't get that sense of austerity in government, because if you're going to spend more, about 60 or 61 billion, I stand to be corrected, that sense of austerity is not being led by the government. Maybe the Ministry of Finance is doing it, but the government as an entity, the government as a company, I'm not feeling that.
I mean, if you look at all of the MMDAs and the programs that we need to support, they are real livelihoods at the end of the day. This whole outcry that we hear from bondholders, it's because it's partly the issue of whether people are getting appropriate, decent wages and salaries for what they do. And even though I would admit it's not decent, the quantum in the end ends up being quite significant for a percentage of revenue that we have. And that becomes an issue. So how much more can you cut? I mean, if you were to talk to any ministry, I mean, they will tell you that they are bored at the goods and services that we have allocated to them this year as opposed to the previous year. And all of those things, have seen quite a bit of cut. I'm expecting that with the exchange program, we'll hopefully then be able to reduce the expenditures in our interest charges, and that would really bring our deficit to controllable limits, because we need to still move towards the under 5% in the FRA.
Can we cut more?
Can we cut more? We will certainly look during the year to be able to adjust, as we get the benefits of the debt program and see. But you can have government come into a halt, okay? That's important. Work must go on. And you can't do an austerity program and not be conscious of social protection that we have to do. But that has to be done efficiently. But certainly we have a team that is going to continue to be vigilant about what MMDA spend.
Is there an alternative to this debt exchange program?
What do we have? Essentially, if we look at, globally, you can't have a situation where you are paying 20-25% interest on government issuance and believe that you can, make progress with your macros. So we have to do something with the debt program. First, we have our fiscal adjustments, macro plans, structural changes. You then need a debt program to really get you off this 102% or 5% down to 55 over this landing zone of 2028. We have to get there to reduce that debt.
Moving on, some staff of Vodafone Ghana are unsure about their job security as the National Communications Authority approves conditional sale of majority shares of the company to Telecel. Some of the staff who spoke to Joy Business on conditions of anonymity hinted that although it is a welcome news to have a new phase of leadership in the company, the transition could negatively impact on their jobs. Here is a Business Desk report. At the former head office located at Kwame Nkrumah Circle here in Accra, the staff said government intervention is necessary to avoid layoffs. One staff who spoke on condition of anonymity said, quote, "For me, I am happy that we will have a new management for the company and may see a turnaround, but I can't be sure of how my job will be sustained. We know what happened to Ghana Telecom when Vodafone took over." End of quote. Others also believe the move is a bad one due to the position of the company having the second largest subscriber base in the country. Meanwhile, the Minister of Communications and Digitalization, Esla Wusu Ekufo, is yet to make any public statement on the takeover and its effect on employees of Vodafone. The National Communications Authority last week granted a provisional approval for the transfer of the 70% majority shares in Vodafone Ghana to Telecel Group. The policy rate of the Bank of Ghana is likely to go up for the 7th time since November 2021. That's according to Bloomberg. Now, the policy committee of the Bank of Ghana is expected to start its meeting from next week, Tuesday. The following report has more.
According to a report, a higher than expected jump in inflation in the last 2 months of 2022 and renewed weakness in the cedi will push the policy rate up from 27%. Any increase in the policy rate will mean loans will become more expensive. Head of Research at Standard Chartered Bank, in charge of Africa and Middle East, Razia Khan, is also projecting a 200 basis point increase in the policy rate to a peak of 31% by March. She added, the longer the debt restructuring takes, the higher the pressure on the cedi, forcing the Bank of Ghana to tighten the policy rate further. Meanwhile, the monetary policy of the Bank of Ghana is expected to begin its quarterly meeting from Tuesday, January 24 to Friday, January 27 to review developments in the economy.
Now, partner corporate transactions and investment banking at Bridgewater Advisors Limited, Prosper Melome, is urging businesses to manage their debt profiles to prevent debt distress in an austere economy. He spoke earlier on the marketplace.
The economic times are hard, and when we talk about financial distress, we are looking at a business's inability to meet its obligations as and when they fall due, right? So this is the core of it. Now, there are a number of things that may lead to distress for businesses. The chief amongst these reasons is overborrowing, debt, large debt. Okay. So when you are over-leveraged as a business, I think that's a classic case of Ghana, okay, on a national level. Okay. So we have a lot of debt. So that's reason number one. Reason number two are macro issues. So when the macro environment is not good, I mean, if you look at the fundamentals currently of our economy, it's not the best. So these are some of the reasons that businesses, but there are also other reasons as combination, number of issues. You have poor management, industry-related issues. There's even things such as regulations within a space that can cause businesses to go into distress.
All right, so when you find yourself in this situation, what do you do?
Well, there are a lot of options. It depends on where the business is in terms of, there's a distress spectrum. So we have businesses that may be mildly distressed, that may be moderate or severe. All right. The decision as to how to handle distress varies. So in a mild case, for example, It may be due to cash flow issues within the cash cycle of the business. So you're looking at managing or adjusting liquidity within that space. As it gets severe, there are also other things that must be done to deal with this. But generally, if you look at the causes that I mentioned earlier, with regards to what causes financial distress, we are looking at number one, the high borrowing.
Okay.
Number two, the issues as it pertains to the macro environment, and then other factors.
Okay.
So if you manage your debt profile, borrowing within debt capacity, you are able to handle issues with distress. If you go out of your debt capacity, then that becomes extremely challenging.
And what are the options for you?
Oh, we have a number of options. I mean, currently, I'll talk about the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act, called CIRA, that was passed in 2020.
Okay.
Now, this act is supposed to give room for businesses to navigate the issues of distress, particularly in the event of insolvency. So within insolvency, we are talking about when you have a negative net worth, where you have your liabilities bigger than your total assets, your total liabilities higher than your total assets. In that situation, CIRA allows you as a company, particularly a limited liability company, to invoke going into administration as a possible option for a business, right? And that would trigger the appointment of an administrator that would consider the possibilities of a restructure to turn the business around, or where it wouldn't work, probably consider liquidation.
And what would be the expediency level of this option you've outlined?
Well, it depends on the situation. You know, even restructuring happens at different stages. Some of the restructuring activities do not even require you going under the law of CIRA to activate, right? Even the management of a business can do some form of restructuring. Now, I'd like to chip in that when it comes to restructuring, we have operational restructuring and financial restructuring, right? When it comes to operational restructuring, we are basically looking at reorganizing the operations of the business. But financial restructuring comes with adjusting the balance sheet of a business. Okay, and so within the powers of the company could go ahead and engage an expert advisor to initiate a restructuring process. However, under the law, in terms of CIRA, there are directives, and it's very specific as to the timelines with regards to that process.
And that's all in this package by way of Business Live here on the Joy News channel. I am Pious Kojo Backah. For more news, you can log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Always a pleasure serving you. Do have a lovely weekend.